Thank you so much to everybody who's joining our coffee chat today. We have two really incredible interpreters and designers with us. Let me pull up these wonderful bios that Heidi has sent me. So we have Dianne Makings and Colin Payne from, Fancy Horse Studios. So Dianne Making, after many years in advertising, Dianne transitioned into animation, producing 2D and 3D stop motion and VR content for global studios. She co-founded Fancy Horse Studios, leading museum, film, and education projects. Prior to that, she produced Our Song for Lucasfilm. Am I getting that right?
It's perfect. Yeah, it was a Star Wars film.
Wow. The first year fully CG Star Wars film made in South Africa. That's amazing. She also founded CTIAF, Africa's largest animation event. All of this sounds absolutely fantastic. I hope my dyslexia is not showing. I'm trying my best to read fluently. And then we have Colin Payne. So Colin Payne started his career working between animation, fine arts, and museums as an exhibition designer, where he honed his skills in narrative design. He expanded into user experiences, product and game design, taking on roles as Chief Creative Officer at Polymorph, an app development company, CEO of Sozo Labs and VR Studio, and CEO of Triggerfish Academy, developing an educational platform for the animation industry. Now, as a broad member of the Cape Town International Animation Festival and the co-founder of Fancy Horse Studios, Colin continues to drive his creative projects across animation, sculpture, and installations in museums. Wow. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about Fancy Horse? Because I see there's another blurb, but I think it would probably be much more interesting coming from you. And then we'll probably go into your really interesting presentation.
Let's tell it with pictures.
Yes.
Let me this too quick. So thank you so much, Robin, and thank you so much to VISSA for letting us come and join you and share with you guys. Fancy Horse Studios is a creative studio. This is some of the projects that we've done. Those top two ones are video games, sculpture. That's a little bit of Our Song at the bottom. Colin and I've worked in creative media our whole lives. These are some of the projects that are currently in development. In fact, Jeannie, who's part of this call, that's her project called Jungles over there.
On the right.
On the right. And Jeannie was one of the team members who was instrumental in helping us bring the vision of Karoo Genesis to life. Karoo Origins. This is some of Colin's early work that when he was working at his Eco Museum, some of his exhibitions there. But what we're really here to do is to tell you a little bit more about Karoo Origins, the fossil center located in Graaff-Reinet in the Eastern Cape. The Karoo Origins started because of this man, Sidney Ruberge, who was a sheep farmer in Graaff-Reinet, and who one day his daughter came to him and said, "Daddy, what is a fossil and where do you find them?" And being Sydney, he packed a picnic basket, took them through to the out on the farm, because he said, "I think it's got something to do with stones." And RC1 is the first one that they ever found, which is what you can see there on the screen. That also is a watercolor we did of Peggy and Sydney in the moment looking for fossils. This is where the collection was originally housed. It was housed on a farm in Wellwood, the Wellwood farm. It was a private collection. It was a collection that had been built up over generations as the family had gone out to the different farms and collected. Slowly but surely, the community had also gotten involved in it. And so the community also started bringing Sydney interesting finds. And that's when he reached out to Dr. Robert Broom and started sharing this. In the collection, they have over 100 holotypes. And when Bruce came to us, he said he knew that he needed to turn this exhibition, or he needed to create a permanent home for this place, and he wanted to build an exhibition center. And this was the site in Graaff-Reinet. So the bottom layer is the exhibition center, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And the top is the research center. And that's for people like yourselves who want to study the fossils. They can make appointments. They've got working space, they're co-located space where you can take the fossils out, you can look at them, and you can study them and go on fossil trips with Bruce. This usually is a lot bigger because this is the roadmap. This is the timeline that we gave ourselves to build the museum. Now, anyone who has built an exhibition before knows that June 2023 to March 2025, just under 2 years, and that is from concept. That is from trying to figure out the first room all the way to installing the final lick of paint. Is absolutely insane. I highly recommend that no one screenshots this and tries to emulate it, because it was a nightmare where we nearly killed everyone on the project. But it was the best way to make the budget work. It was an intense process, and actually out of that pressure, a lot of really good things came out of it. But ultimately, it was a 2-year process from start to finish. The goals of this collection really were to display the family collection. You saw from the previous picture, you know, how they had it in the wellwood, and those cases just didn't really display the fossils in the best way. It was also very important to Bruce that these fossils came from Graaff-Reinet and that they stayed in Graaff-Reinet. He's had countless offers over the decades to house these things somewhere else, and his response has always been, they've been in Graaff-Reinet for 255 million years. What's another couple? We wanted to create excitement about learning and curiosity. We wanted to promote science and support the Research Institute, which is the top layer. And we wanted to present what we knew of the history of the Earth because of fossils like these. Ultimately, we were trying to create a sense of wonder at the world around us and a desire to learn more. We knew that the kids that were coming through this, there was a future paleontologist in there, or a paleo artist that is going to be walking through this. And so the goal was to create not just a museum that was filled with information, but also a sense of an art gallery to inspire them. Colin, maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about the design philosophy around the museum.
A lot of this comes from two places. The one is that a lot of museums represent fossils with a lot of stories of death, because obviously fossils come from death, and so often the stories that are recorded in the fossils are about death. But I find that especially inspiring in terms of museum displays. So we really wanted to focus on the life of the creatures and how they would be more like modern animals and have needs and wants and lives that existed long before they died. And then the other side is that this is an exhibition in Graaff-Reinet, so it needed to be low maintenance and easy to manage. And then the last thing is also that exhibitions are, there's a lot of discussion these days about interactivity in exhibitions, but my feeling is that exhibitions are interactive. You go to a space, you walk around, you navigate it in 3 dimensions through time. That is interactive. As soon as you start putting in touch screens and buttons to press, you actually remove people from the space they're in and focus them in on a 2D screen, and that cuts out the people they're with and the environment around them. So I try to always avoid that as a principle. Yeah.
And I think the most important thing, and what we're going to be talking about here about the animation, is ensuring that the animals and the themes remain consistent and recognizable. So this is some of the inspiration that we took from other paleo artists. Again, it's animals at rest, it's animals at play, it's animals living life. Colin, what were some of the stories that we needed to tell?
Well, I suppose, so from the perspective of Bruce, there was a bunch of stuff that needed to be done, and from the steering committee who were representing the Thunders. So it was a huge amount about the Graaff-Reinet area, keeping this in the area, the history of the area, bringing people to the area. So, you know, we really wanted it to focus on what happened there and use it as a narrative through time about the history of the Karoo. But of course, it's also interesting that South Africa has one of the most complete fossil records in the world. It's pretty unique in that sense. So we were also trying to tell the whole story of the evolution of life using the rocks around Graaff-Reinet as kind of a flashpoint. And the rocks around Graaff-Reinet are specifically from the Perma-Triassic extinction around 252 million years ago. And then through that story, and this will come up in what we're actually getting to in the animations, is how changing environments drive evolution. That's kind of a key theme for the entire exhibit that ties it to the environmental challenges of today.
Yeah. This, I think, is really interesting to a group like yourself, because we had to plan out not only what the rooms would be and what they would house and what theme that room would have, which Colin did using this flow chart, but then he also plotted out the emotional journey of a visitor. What did we want to make them feel in each room? What did we want to show them? What did we want to not show them? What did we want to be the through line of this? And creating this kind of like user journey and like this emotional journey for the thing. Really, when we got stuck on a creative problem, this is what we could come back to. The time and geology room is all about inciting a sense of curiosity and giving them a basic understanding, so that when they walk into the Permian diversity room, we hit them with awe and wonder. And when you're doing your own exhibits, we highly recommend doing this, not just plotting what goes into each room, but what do you want the viewer to like have inside of them? What do you want them to leave that room with?
This also helps because we did not know the exhibition space for about the first year.
That's true.
We went through about 3 exhibition spaces, so we had to keep ideas very fluid.
This is just a room plan, so you can see there's 7 rooms in total. It's a big spot. This we did, okay, so this is where the animation starts coming. And before we went ahead and into any type of pre-production, what we did is we created like an architect's view of what this would look like. But this isn't just the rooms. This had the actual displays all on them. And what's amazing to us, like 4 years later, is how accurate these initial proposals were. So we pretty much stuck to this layout for all the exhibitions. And you'll see that as we go through it. This was very, very useful as a tool, and I highly recommend for all designers in the group to consider going through the extra effort of planning it out digitally, because the funders could sign this off and they could hold us accountable to this vision. But in the same way, we didn't have to over-explain ourselves about what concepts were, because we could take them through this and say, that's what that room looks like. It took a little bit of extra time, but it was well worth it in the end, especially when things got a little bit murky or there had been miscommunication, which happens on every large-scale project. Colin, do you want to tell us about the creature reconstruction?
Fun
stuff.
This is the stuff that we're really here for. So one of the things that we really wanted to get right on this exhibit was keeping consistency. So my first big project at Aziko was Stone Bones of the Ancient Karoo, and that was done on an absolute shoestring with me and Roger. And because of that, we kind of used whatever photos and illustrations were in the archive, a lot of Cedric Hunter's old work, but that was all produced over decades. And so the thing that I think I dislike most about what I did at Stone Bones was having to reuse those, because when you walk through that exhibit, I almost defy anybody to track which creature is which. They change color and shape and size depending on the picture, because we just used whatever we had. I can't remember the budget, but it was crazy small. I think we spent most of the budget on the carpets. And so it was really important that, because we were doing sculpture, illustrations, 2D animation, 3D animation, and a whole bunch of other stuff, that each animal that we really focused on reconstructing was recognizable in whatever form it was presented in. And the goal of the 3D animation, which we'll get to last, was to kind of really display an entire environment that visitors could kind of really feel like they're sitting at a waterhole in the ancient Karoo, watching animals behave as they should behave. The sculptures were there so that people could stand next to them and get a real sense of the size and the scale and all of that magic stuff. And then a lot of the 2D stuff was, adding to the illustration, and a lot of it was either decorative to fill out the space, or in the case of the animations, as info dumps. So they were quite a lot simpler, but we needed people to be able to look and go, that's the Gorgonopsian. So on the screen, there's various versions here. And in fact, you can see the changing form of the Gorgonopsian, because this one here was our original treatment, and this one here was our final treatment. This is the Rubigia atrox, the biggest Gorgonopsian in South Africa, and the second largest in the world. Inostracevia in Russia is apparently slightly bigger, but that's a little bit argumentative and competitive. Yeah, paleontologists, that fun group. So we were very lucky in this project because of Bruce's collection. We had a lot of reference material, and we were able to, for example, get this is a Procynasuchus skull, and we were able to scan them, and this is photogrammetry, get 3D models of the skulls and some of the other bones, but mainly the skulls, for our 3D artist to work on top of. So, oh, that didn't work.
Grant Stain was the 3D artist on
Yes.
this, and we couldn't have gotten more lucky with him because he is a mixture of artist and anatomist. And so he took all his knowledge of contemporary animals, of how like the muscle structures, you know, meet up on contemporary animals, and was able to apply this knowledge here. So we would send him photogrammetry of the skeletons like this. He would then build those skeletons in 3D models. Then he'd attach the musculature. And that went through like several peer reviews before we even started putting the skin on it. And that was a huge component of the design aspect of this, is that we'd do something, then we had to send it to Russia, the US, the UK, and WITS.
And some people in South America.
And some people in South America. And we'd get peer reviewed by 5 different groups of scientists to tell us how close we had got it or where we had gotten wrong. And the discussions out of that were amazing because it was actually on the Pariasaur model. Grant had sent through a proposal, and the scientists had come back and gone, no, it's not like this, it's more like this. And he proved to them that the physics of it wouldn't have worked.
It was when we actually took it into animation. We started the discussion with Grant, but then we pushed it through to the animation side. And this was specifically about Pariasaurs are very broad. They've got a very wide stance for like reptiles, but they're also incredibly heavy, weigh tons. And we found when we took it into animation, if the front feet were out here, basically if you lifted a foot in order to make it walk, it would just fall over. So we had to argue for getting its front feet slightly closer together, and they were open to that.
Yeah, and that I think is one of the proudest collaborations that we've had on this project, just because like that's the intersection of art and science, where you can take the scientific papers and you can put it into a visualization like this to help further the understanding.
So working on top of the actual structure of the skeletons, Grant was able to kind of morph them out from the deformation that happens in fossils, and also Grant has an interesting background because he works a lot with super realistic animals. He's built like hyenas or crocodiles or elephants and that sort of thing. So he understands anatomy, and it was really great for him and me to sit with the scientists and discuss, because I know what I want them to look like, but I don't always know the anatomy, and Grant does. So we were able to get through stuff. Now, this is a very early version of the Procynasuchus. It is struggling with a very key factor in prehistoric reconstructions, which is shrink wrapping. You can see how the skull is not working yet. The bones of the head are just sticking out there. It has not got the proper musculature on there. And that's a very common thing in reconstructing these things. But this is a slightly more finished version, a very much better structure. You can kind of see, if you look closely, the legs are not in fact attached properly, and there is no mouth detail. But in this one, this is very close to final. The legs are now attached and the mouth is open in a very awkward pose, but that's so that Grant can see inside to remodel the teeth.
The level of detail on these reconstructions was like we would take the Pariasaur, especially like the actual teeth. We modeled the teeth of the Procynasuchus were also modeled on actual fossils. There is nothing about this creature that comes from our imagination. The fossils informed everything.
What did come from our imagination and many discussions with scientists is behavior. So
Jeannie did this.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeannie.
A lot of the 2D stuff you'll see here is Jeannie's work. But these were the kinds of little explorations we did to think through that animals in life, animals asleep in the sun, animals playing, just to try and breathe that life into them, little expressions, little interactions, and then taking that and trying out different color patterns. This was an incredible amount of work looking at modern animals that exist in similar behavior patterns to the creatures we were looking at. And then, so we'd look at their behavior and what modern animals would what sort of patination they'd have, what sort of colors they'd have. And then we'd also look at reptiles and mammals, because these are therapsids, most of them, mammal-like reptiles, and kind of look at what can we steal from modern reptiles and modern mammals and kind of bring together so that they at least have a feeling of being lizardy but on their way towards mammals, because that is all pure fiction for the most part. As far as I know, the only skin of therapsids that's ever been found is Lystrosaurus, which does give us a lot of information, but that's one species, and with no color. I know with dinosaurs, they've now found fossils with pigmentation and stuff in them. We don't have that for therapsids. So this is all very much made up, but made up with an eye for accuracy through what we can understand from modern science. So here we have some just pictures of the building of Rubigia atrox. So this is the first version, which is shrink wrapped and does not look very good. And this is very close to the final version, which is not shrink wrapped and it does look excellent. And then a similar thing with expressions. So the Rubigia atrox was our star. It's the big toothy one. Everybody likes the big toothy one. It's like the T-Rex of the time. It's also named after, Rubigia. It's named after the Rubige family. So it was not only the central sculpture in the Permian room, but the sort of hero of the animation. So we really needed to get it right and really get its stance right. And all of that's built off the fossils and how they worked. So then we had to get lots of expressions right and poses right. And again, this is Jeannie's work.
And Jeannie did something really interesting here, because we have a bull terrier at home and she spent some time with us and was watching the bull terrier. And between her and Colin, they came up with these poses like, what would its life be like? And using our bull terrier as a bit of inspiration, this is where these poses came. And when these poses came out, suddenly we realized, oh, that's what we're making. We're making animals. We're not making animals that are always eating each other. We're actually making animals that have an itch and want to lie down. And that's where these drawings became so important for us as a guiding light.
And then these were the various treatments that we tried to get the colors right. None of them got used in the end. This was the original one chosen, but we ended up changing it based on some input from Julien Benoit, who likes the theory, or has the theory, that a lot of these animals would have had quite brightly colored heads for various reasons. So we kind of introduced that, especially on the Gorgonopsian, and adapted it with stripes and things on the back. So there is our final character lineup. After all of this, there were a few other creatures that we reconstructed, sometimes in just illustration and that kind of thing. We did a Therocephalian and a few others. Sorry, and we also did some Triassic animals, but we'll show them in a little bit. But these were our stars for the Permian. From left to right, the Pariasaurus, the Aulocephalodon, the Kitchingonomodon, the Gorgonopsian, Rubigia atrox, the Diectodon, and the Procynosuchus. They are not to scale. That would be a very big Diectodon. But we need to see how they would look together to make sure that they look slightly different, but also look sort of as accurate scientifically as possible.
A huge amount of time was spent on making sure that the illustrations match the sculptures, match the animation. So this is the illustrated lineup of the creatures, which then got used on the poster work. But by taking the time to make sure that the colors match, the forms match, the shapes matched, it is very recognizable in the Karoo Origin Center that that's a Diectodon. And you can track that Diectodon wherever it goes.
Yeah. Right, so just briefly, before we get to the actual thing we're here to talk about, which is the animations. Oh my goodness, this is meant to go faster. The sculptures, just so that you've seen them after everything we've said. So that is our Rubigia half done. That is the original sketch that I did of what I wanted the diorama to look like. And I love showing the sketch because I did it one day after a lot of discussions with the scientists where I'd been coming up with stories. And I sat down, I was like, okay, well, I've got to get a visual. And I drew this. And in the end, we ended up with that, which was incredibly close. Really, for the most part, a few things got rearranged. We lost the baby Pariasaur because of discussions about how their herding would have worked and size constraints. But it took nearly 2 years between doing that doodle and getting that finished. And it works magnificently.
And to all the designers out there, never discount your doodles. Your doodles are so important. Never throw away your doodles.
There's also a nice little picture just to get an idea of what the actual installation is like, because we're not here to talk about it today and we're going to move on to the animations. But you can see here how the pariasaur is this very gray blue color. Its case is over, it's not in the shot, but we kind of colored up because it's not a therapsid. It's an anapsid, a parareptile, fully extinct now. So we needed it to look a bit different, but I wanted to tie the Gorgonopsian to the Gorgonopsian skulls behind it. So we kind of use the same colors. All of the dicynodonts are shades of green, and then we push them to make sure they don't look too much the same. And all of the cases are colored green in the sort of khaki-ish color. The real green back there is for the archosaurs. But yeah, so we kind of color coded the whole thing. All of the collection is accessible. These are just cupboards with glass doors. So everything is kind of like display storage. That's enough of that, though. Let's get on to the 2D animations.
So the 2D animations were really important. You can see the draw over here. We're going to go through quickly on this because we really want to focus on the 3D animations. Accuracy in the 2D space was so important because we wanted people to be able to recognize the skulls, and we wanted them to be able to recognize the fossils, and we wanted them to be able to recognize the creatures. Essentially, we were explaining continental drift, environmental change, how the fossils form, how we learned about prehistory from the fossils. Therefore, we know about extinctions and how environmental changes drive evolution, all the while focusing it in Graaff-Reinet. Now, what was important about this is that the animations became, if you didn't read the poster work, if you weren't the type of person that went into rooms and like looked at all the poster work, you could sit in front of the TV and you could watch 2-3 minute videos and you'd get it. All that information would be would be available to you through that. We start always with the notes. These are just copious notes taken from multiple thesis papers, from Colin's own research, from the research that Bruce gave us, and there was just the facts. The facts then got turned into a script, but not a traditional script, like a script of like, we're going to open our Graaff-Reinet, we're going to pan down, we're going to see fossils, just try and giving us like a framework or some bones to work with. Then we went into a fuller script. This had a little bit more creativity into it. How are we going to explain these concepts? How are we going to illustrate the facts behind it?
And that also gave us an opportunity to get all of that information reviewed by scientists to make sure that we weren't telling fibs, and then doing a lot of work to build visuals around incorrect information. So we were able to put all of this together, develop the script, get it tested, fact-checked by professionals, so that when we moved into visual development, we weren't wasting our time.
Yeah. I mean, you can see Jiminy's comment there of, is there a specific species I can reference? And that's in relation to the krill. That's how absolutely detailed and focused we were, because that's the review process that we were going through. From there, we go to beat boards. Beat boards are where you take the main ideas of the script and you put them into visual format. Words on paper do not necessarily translate to visuals on screen. And so that's when you're translating the script to the visual, that's often where you find your first set of story problems. From that, you then go into actual animatics. These are basic animations.
Get the timing right, get the sound, start getting a feeling for the sound, how that can work. Get the script on screen, test that it works for visual, so all of that stuff. So this is effectively what animation would look like, but in a much simpler, more brushy version.
Everything in animation is iterative. You just keep building on top of the other thing, and that's really where our training comes in. As Colin trained in fine art and I trained in drama, and so all our training has been about building iteratively, and nothing is more true than animation. So when we were doing the museum, that is very much the principle we followed. Start with something small and then just keep building on top of it.
Should we go to the next?
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Whoops.
Oops. Not in presenter view. Right.
After that, Jeannie did some key style frames for us. So now we've got like the basic story, it's hanging together. Now it's time to see, what is this thing actually going to look like?
Color
Because
scheme,
what
texture.
is the color scheme? What is the texture? So these were some early drawings that she did. And her and Colin worked on together just to like describe the mood and what this thing was going to look like. These cutout bits over here, this is called puppet animation, cutout style animation. And so wherever you see like a, like a shape over there, picture a pair of scissors cutting it out so that you can like move it, and that's the rig.
We've got a great video of that later. And that was also just the different colors of the creatures, testing them and figuring them out.
Now this is interesting because this was a beautiful background that Jeannie painted up on the left-hand side. We loved it so much. Compositionally, it worked beautifully. And then we sent it to the scientists and they were like, nope, there would be no mountains there.
Can't have mountains.
Can't have mountains. And luckily we had working with a small agile team. We were not a big studio. And so we could respond to that kind of feedback, and we could be quite agile in always responding to make sure that it was the most accurate it could be.
And in terms of accuracy, you know, even though it's simple 2D, all of the plants here are plants that would have existed in the early Triassic. Everything here is at least aiming to be as scientifically accurately as possible.
We got introduced to the most loveliest woman, Dr. Rose Prevac, who helped us so much with the botany of prehistory.
Sorry, hit the, there we go.
Thanks.
So this was the first version of a shot from the 2D animation showing the Proterosuchus, and here you can really see how those shapes work. This was kind of a test for how the animation would work based on the puppetry of the illustrations.
Animation is incredibly labor intensive. There's no button that you can press that just says animate. You've got to move every single piece on the screen, and honestly, it's such dedication from artists to be able to do this. I'm going to skip through these. These were 2 long panning shots just showing the changing environments. This again we used in 2 ways. We tried to take what was in the animation, put it in the wall so that people could see the relation between the 2 videos.
So this was a tricky animation because it was a panning shot and it was going to be used as a mural, which is there. That's the actual physical installation. And this is another, right, so this is an early version. This is not the final version, but an early version of that shot. Again, looking at being scientifically accurate. This is of the Siberian traps, the biggest known volcanism the world has ever seen. Well, after the Hadean period.
And I can't tell you how hard it is to animate lava. We really struggled with that bit.
And then moving on to other 2D stuff. This was a scene where we were explaining both the changing environments of the Permian and how fossils are formed. And these are the rigs of the 2D rigs of the Kitchingonomodon that would go down to drink, and the dragonfly that would fly across the scene. And this is the 2 scenes in which, you know, before and after, live Kitchingonomodon, dead Kitchingonomodon, and the panning of the camera and how it gets planned. And I think we have a scene
But after doing that, we realized that the scene didn't quite work anymore. And so we, with the discussion with the animation team, we adjusted it. And this is.
Oh, I don't think we're gonna have to play for a long time to get.
Oh,
there,
okay.
But
we're gonna skip ahead with the 2Ds because I think it's time to get into the 3Ds.
But basically, in that shot, you saw how the land popped up. We hated that.
We did.
It was a good idea, it seemed at the beginning, but it just didn't work in practice.
Yeah.
So we completely redid that shot for the final thing.
Let's see if we can do this in 10 minutes so we still have time for questions.
Yes. Okay. So this was the centerpiece of the whole exhibit, and this is what Bruce first contacted us about. This project grew over the course of the project. It nearly doubled in budget and size. But the core of it was always Bruce had this idea of what would it be like to sit at a waterhole in the late Permian and just watch animals like you would in the Kruger Park. And it was pretty much going to be that and the fossil collection around it. And then as the project progressed and as the steering committee liked our ideas, it grew. So this is one of the earliest pieces of concept art that, again, Jeannie did, showing the idea of the waterhole. And it's sort of pretty much the first artwork that came out that really showed us what we were aiming to build. And you can see the Procynosuchus there in the corner, and our Gorgonopsian. Some pariasaurs going for a swim, and some Kitchingonomodon wandering down a cliff. And that's pretty much what we got. Oh, there's some Diectodons over there. But how to get there is, again, we've already been through this a bit, so I'll go really fast through it. But we had to go through long discussions trying to understand how these animals would behave. What would their lives have been like? Would they have been herding creatures? Would they have lived in groups? And a lot of this is guesswork based on what we know of the fossils. So I did long interviews with scientists, spent afternoons with them just kind of asking questions. We even used to play a little game called, some of you might know, Top Trumps, where you have cards and like attack power 10 versus attack power 9. I did that with them. They thought it was very bizarre, because I wanted to get an idea of who was in charge in this waterhole and how would it have worked. And so, for example, in the end, we ended up with the Gorgonopsian that sort of largely mimics behavior somewhere between a lion and a Komodo. Komodo dragons being large tree. And then we'd build out stories for the different creatures. So this is sort of all the different things that the Gorgonopsian could do. We called her Gorgie. And then we worked out different areas in the stage that we were going to be animating on, and where they would go. And everything started with this Rubigia atrox Gorgie.
We knew that Gorgie was the hero, so all the action had to happen around her.
And she was also the big predator, so other animals would respond to her presence. And so she became sort of the driving force. But we also knew that we wanted the Procynosuchus, which you can just make out here. They were key to the whole exhibit because they're the specimen that sits just before the PT extinction, representing the cynodonts, and the cynodont lineage eventually brings us to mammals and us. So while Rubigia atrox was kind of the star of the show from a sort of sensational point of view, big and toothy, the little Procynosuchus was the star of the show because they were the linking story of mammals. And so, yeah, then we had to just work out the actual script, and that's some notes from that. Then, of course, we'd had all of that modeling of animals, but we didn't know what the plants looked like. So that's when me and Jeannie sat with Rose for many, many hours. And then these are more of Jeannie's drawings, figuring out what 2 types of horsetails would look like, and all of the various details there, because these things are not often constructed accurately. And here is a lineup to give to the environment team, showing, again, our Rubigia atrox Gorgie as a reference point, and all of the little
mosses and things like that. And I mean, this just goes to show like the incredible amount of work that has to happen in animation. What you see as the final animation is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how much creative work goes in behind the scenes on that. This time I'm just going to show you some of the turntables, you know, then it goes off and gets modeled. Now remember, we've got like, you know, hundreds of those Phylothecas and Schizoneuras sitting in it, and those have to be hand placed at every single moment. This is the original modeling of some of the moss, even the moss we created originally, and its size line up to the Gorgonopsian. This talks to some of like the staging plane. So again, we're moving now from the 2D space into the 3D space. So the perspective drawings have to change a little bit now, because now we have to figure out, how is this thing going to live in the actual world? So from that concept painting, Jeannie gave us this perspective drawing, which we fed to the 3D team. And the 3D team then had to interpret it into a 3D space. And that proved to be much harder than what we were expecting. Usually there are all sorts of filmmaker tricks that you can use in a piece like this. You can cut, you can edit, you can zoom. But because we were trying to immerse people in a waterhole, we had to keep a locked camera. That meant we couldn't use any of our filmmaking tricks. Like, understanding the filmmaking process, you'll understand like when you cheat something just to make your point or just to get a look through. On this one, it was very unforgiving, and we had to make sure everything was perfectly accurate for all the herds of creatures.
Did you also mention that everything had to be animated individually?
No, that's what you're going to know.
Because of this very problem that I was just describing, there was no, I mean, even normally in animation, you'd animate individual elements and then get them all comped together into a frame. But here there's the additional problem of the sheer scale of the thing. Having 20-something animated creatures in one shot was just totally out of the question, which meant that every single animal needs to be animated in small, few seconds at a time loops, stitched together and then laid together, which means one of our core concerns was, will these animals intersect, and trying to plot out all of their movements really, really carefully. That's just prepping the models, which were done at very high fidelity, prepping them for animation, lowering the resolution and all that.
From there comes like the characteristics. And if I had to show you the reference videos of Colin crawling around our garden, you would be thrilled, because how do you find this creature's walk? And you also need to figure out the different ways that these creatures, that their different characteristics, each creature needs its own character and personality. So that would again go back to the script. It would go back to like how they acted, and then we'd try to define that visually.
And here's our little scurrying Procynosuchus. And of course, because of how we were doing it, we were trying to animate like a generic walk for each creature and then a specialized walk if they needed it. So the Procynosuchus and the Rubigia both needed to be able to run, or in the case of the Rubigia, also creep very, very slowly up to its prey. Which is also actually a good moment to mention that this whole thing was a loop, is a loop. And so along with not really wanting to show like too much death and that sort of thing, we in fact got a little bit trapped because we didn't want it to kind of fade to black and then fade back up. We wanted just to continue. We wanted to be able to watch it and watch it a few times in a row, maybe not even realizing that they're watching it on a loop, because there's so much happening on screen that you can watch one animal through the first loop and then another one through the next loop. But it meant that nothing could, you couldn't kill an animal and leave a carcass lying there. What would happen to it? How would we reset? So everything needed to kind of reset itself organically and naturally.
Which led to this. This I'm going to take because I think this almost drove Colin insane. But Colin and Katie had to plot out each character's journey and where they would arrive at each moment. So if you look for D1, D5, A3, A2, these are all the positions that they would find them, each creature would find themselves in. And that's how we knew at what point in the show we were planning for these creatures to intersect. This map became so important because we were animating each creature on their own. We didn't need to, couldn't figure out when they would interact. We got you, Heidi. We're only going to be 2 more minutes. This is some early staging stuff with just some 2D things in it to give us a sense of where we were going. But we only really knew what we were doing and when we got into the 3D space. 2D to 3D is almost impossible to really figure out. So the animation here is really low fidelity. There's very minimal movement. But at least we get a sense of like, the herd moves in here, that's when that one goes up the tree.
This is just one of my briefing videos because there were, what, 8
Okay, hi. So here we are for a Procynosuchus brief for the Permian waterhole.
This kind of in-depth briefing was incredibly important. The animators needed to understand almost as much as we did during this time so that they could like understand and get into the characters of their creatures. Again, this is low fidelity animation. Then we go slightly higher fidelity when you figure out more of the problems.
And then eventually we start bringing together different loops of animation. So here we have the 2 Procynosuchus having a tug of war over a little diapsid they catch and carry off screen so that we don't have to deal with that. And the Gorgonopsian coming on, and we were testing whether she would notice them. Here she gives a really big look over in their direction, and we toned it down in the final animation because we didn't think it worked very well. And
now presenting to you the final piece, which we thought we could just play in the background. This is the final piece.
This is the final piece.
This is the final piece. This is textured, animated, and runs for 12 minutes in a seamless loop.
No, 6 minutes.
Sorry, 6 minutes.
6.5.
Sorry, it's the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just turn up the sound. But yes, please, let's hear your questions. Like, let's hear from you. We've done a lot of talking now.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. Here's my video. Thank you so much. I have many burning questions. I haven't seen any in the chat yet, but I'm sure there's more to come. I think my first question would be, given like the cost, I mean, this is a lot of research, a lot of work. Animation is rightly one of the most expensive assets to put on an exhibition. But I want you to know a little bit more about the value of it. Like, I've seen just with these animations, the levels of storytelling you're able to incorporate. Do you think it's worth the value and the cost of putting all of these onto displays?
So I think, you go to a surgeon and you ask if you need surgery and they're going to say yes. Like, as animators, I'm always going to advocate for animation. But that doesn't mean that animation can solve every problem, because animation can give you like the experience of it, and it can give you the emotional journey of it. And it's probably the thing that you'll remember as you walk away from the exhibition. But without the poster work and without the display work, you'll never really satisfy the curious visitor who wants to know more. And I think that's what's unique about museums and exhibition centers, is that you get to experience the information not on a screen.
Are there any other questions? Heidi, I see your cameras come on.
I always have a question. Hi, Dianne. Hi, Colin. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. I'm sorry I came a bit late to the meeting. With our time change, Europe, South Africa, I completely lost the time. But I'm glad I got to actually hear this, because I got to I cheat, you see. Being the host, usually I get to chat to everybody beforehand. For those of you who've never been to one of our webinars, I get to chat to the hosts beforehand and get a bit of an insight as to what happens and what they're going to talk about. And then I get to sit through the talk as well. So I've always got questions. I love the fact that you guys showed the whole fact that you looked at the emotional journey. You didn't just sort of say, well, they want these dinosaurs, how are we going to make them look realistic, put them into a scene? It was like, well, how's it going to work with everything else? How are you going to make the visitor feel as you go through the whole exhibition area, not just this waterhole? What is this waterhole going to do? It's like all the other little aspects that go into it. So I liked that. I mean, it was a very quick preview that we got of that themes page that you had, showing the different storylines and the different themes that come into this whole exhibition. Would it be possible to maybe just show it again? What your main theme was? Did I catch it that the main theme was life, not death? Or
there was a big part of the philosophy that we wanted to follow. Yes. Let me stop sharing this and go back to that slide.
Or was it the fact that Graaff-Reinet is like a major hub for fossil discovery?
I think everyone, both on the steering committee and the design team, and then the curatorial team, perhaps everyone had slightly different views on what the most important part was, right? So Graaff-Reinet was very important for the funders and very important for a tourism aspect. Of course, Bruce's main focus was on the, how his collection was displayed. And our main focus was on, we really wanted the information to be beautiful and for people to want to look at it. But this whole slide over here, this all comes from Colin. This is very much a Colin way of thinking, of always thinking about the audience and the viewer. And you'll see that in every piece of his work. And I'm speaking for him because he doesn't like to speak about himself in this way. But understanding the viewer and making sure that he is creating an emotional journey for them as they go along, not just an information load as they go along, but giving them bite-sized pieces of information. I mean, you ended up in some like pretty tense conversations with the curatorial team. You know, they love 16-page documents because that's their entire life. I mean, who's going to do that, yo?
Yeah.
Like, so we would use me as like the lowest common denominator. And we would use me as like, he would give me information. And then after a while, I'd be like, oh, no more, no more. Oh.
It's a tricky thing. So film, for anyone who knows anything about film, you know, most films follow a very particular arc. And like a James Bond movie is actually a really handy example of it, just because it's an action movie and so it's quite straightforward. And there's always like something really exciting at the very beginning to grab your attention, often before the credits, and then a little bit of an introduction of a problem, and then it gets to a crisis point, and then it slumps a little bit with exposition in the middle of the movie, and then it builds to a big climax at the end, and then you get your satisfying ending. And that is a sort of experience path that can be mapped to almost anything. And it works really well, and it's been tested on virtually every type of medium, particularly in film and television, and it works a lot. And so the tricky bit with an exhibition is you need to kind of structure the whole exhibition against an experience like that, but each micro part of the exhibition, especially with film and video and animation. So it was kind of planning all of that out, like trying not to inject anything too exciting too early, because then the ending feels really flat. So you don't it's kind of tricky in that the Permian Biodiversity Hall has the amazing sculptures, and it is very beautiful. And then you get the water hole, which is the real centerpiece of it. And after that, it is a little bit downhill, because in the Triassic, especially straight after the extinction event, all of the animals get very much smaller. And so the sculptures are by their nature less impressive. So we had to kind of really build in some structure to make those moments land. And the animation was particularly useful in this for two reasons. The one is it's big and it's flashy, so you can do a lot with it and you can control the emotional journey. And the other one, which is just really functional, is people sit down. So we had to plan the whole exhibition around the three main animations, because the 2D was split into two pieces, and then there was the waterhole. And all three of them gave an opportune moment for people to sit down. So we didn't want the video right at the beginning, because no one wants to sit down as they come in. You put it in the second room so that they can learn a lot and then have a little seat. And then go to the big exciting room and then go and sit down.
And that was also carefully plotted out. The idea that in the second room, we wanted them to feel confident that they were understanding the material that was in front of them. So the material isn't particularly dense. Sometimes it gets a little bit more dense, but there is an animation there. And the animation there just shows you, this is what you've learned so far. It recaps. So by the time you walk into the Permian Biodiversity Room, you're feeling confident that you understand this. You're good. I often find that when I walk into these spaces that I get so overwhelmed as someone who doesn't usually work with this kind of thing, that I feel, oh, maybe this isn't for me, or oh, maybe I'm not smart enough to understand this. And so we did a lot of testing of this to make sure that people felt very confident every time they went into a room, that they knew what was going on. And if there's anything that I can say to the designers of the group here, is make sure that you are testing your concepts against people like me, because I'm your visitor. It's not the other paleo people that are your visitors. It's not the scientists. It's not designers that understand this world. It's me. So it's me that has to be able to understand what you're trying to communicate. And that actually worked out very well in our favor. And we had so many people who were so gifted in the paleo world. Jeannie, Colin, they understood the stuff. But then if there was ever a concept that needed to be tested, we'd send it to me, or we'd send it, and then I got too knowledgeable. So we'd keep sending it out to people who didn't know.
Make use of our daughter and her friends who, well, they're now 11, but you know, she was sort of 9 when we started this. And it was also interesting because our daughter would get immune to this. She actually built a lot of understanding, and so she became a bit useless to me as a test subject, because she actually got everything. So then every time a friend would come over, I'd be like, come watch this video, tell me what you think, what do you learn, what do you know?
And that's how we realized that some of our concepts were siding towards what Bruce wanted. And obviously Bruce has lived this, breathed this literally his entire life. And that's when we knew we needed to pull it back a little bit and explain more basic concepts first.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
I saw an Amy hand go up. Amy, do you still have questions?
No, I could talk for a long time, but just congratulations, Colin. Colin was in Aziko before me, and has left a very big legacy. And we've just put up Colin, to let you know, we've just put up a collage on each of our floors in one of the exhibitions. So there's a photo of you staring at a model and models that look very similar to this. I suppose we don't really have time, but my biggest, I think, is more actually just a congratulations, because I know how hard it is to work with paleontologists. Sorry, Robin, I love you, but and for sticking your ground, and just the museum world's been a buzz with your exhibition, and congratulations, guys. Lots of years of very hard work, and it's looking gorgeous. I'm planning to see it in December. I do want to know what was possibly your biggest difficulty with doing something out in somewhere like Graaff-Reinet?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's the obvious two problems. The one was transporting stuff there, because we couldn't manufacture a lot there. And connected to that was it's actually even worse than we thought, because there's been some things like that we just want to get reprinted or reapplied or whatever, and there's literally no one there. Like, there's even a signage shop, and we've been really struggling to get their guy to just go down and look at the problem and print a new piece of vinyl and stick it on the wall. And it's little fixes that, you know, like if it was at Iziko, it'd take 20 minutes to fix, you know, but I'm not going to drive for 8 hours up there to fix it myself and then drive back. It can't be a 15,000 Rand problem.
Yeah.
And it's amazing just how little there is in a place like Graaff-Reinet that you would take for granted in Cape Town or Johannesburg.
And also, like, that was a proof point to the funders. The funders and the steering committee kept going to us, going, it's not interactive enough. We need the screens. We need the touch screens. Like, the kids, they like computers, AR codes. Oh my God, if we heard the word AR code.
QR code? AR code.
QR codes.
Oh God, yeah. Scientists cannot get over QR codes.
Woo, they love them, yo. And we kept saying, first of all, as soon as you're interacting with your device, you're not interacting with the exhibition. And we strongly believe that. And eventually, but they didn't believe it, because they didn't, you know, they had their own ideas. Eventually, the thing that convinced them was that when it goes wrong, because it will go wrong, it absolutely will fail on you. You're going to have a dead wall or a dead screen. And that is, it's like a death blow to an exhibition, walking past things that you know you're supposed to see something on, and it's just bleh.
Yeah. I mean, like the waterhole animation, it relies on a very, very big, very powerful video projector. If that video projector breaks, they've got to get it fixed, which means shipping it to Joburg and getting it back. It's easy enough to manage, though, because they can get a local projector and just sort of have a slightly worse display for a bit. But there was lots of talk of adding more stuff, and we kept fighting really hard. We're so glad we fought that hard.
We're so glad that we have fought that hard, because even the minor things that have gone like wrong, it was like, you know, in an exhibition, you know,
the TV's not working.
There was a frame that got chipped. There was a label that fell off. They couldn't find local suppliers to print the label. So we were reprinting a chair and then shipping it out to them. And that's huge.
Very challenging. But that said, there's a lot of things that do work. And, you know, for example, the shipping everything up there, like all of the sculptures, was expensive and challenging, but went off perfectly. Yeah. Box them, crate them, treat them carefully, put them on a truck, and there they arrive.
And I know there's been like a lot of chatter about why is a a research center like this with, you know, exhibitions like this so far away? Why isn't it in a city center? And I would argue it's the exact perfect place for it to be, because that's where the research is happening. That's where the studying is happening. We have a Zico here in Cape Town. We've got Wits in Joburg. Like, driving people to where the source of where the information is so that you can actually see the geology around you and where the fossils might be. That is so special. And if it drives people to visit smaller towns and it drives them to understand our landscape beyond a computer screen, I'm all for it, Joe.
I mean, there's a case study to be made for, I just remember when the Owl House changed its entrance door from one street to the next street, how the entire town was up in arms because that changed the economy of the entire street.
I can believe it.
So yeah, no, I mean, look, my family's from the Eastern Cape. My brother's already been to it. Yeah, no, we very, very excited, but yeah, it's great to see, but it's also good to know what the issues are.
Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Leonia from the Navy Museum. I'm
yeah.
going to forward this to my daughter who's studying animation, so she'll be so excited to see this. We've got, I don't know if you can see behind me, a lot of models here at the Navy Museum. This is a submarine model, and I wanted to do for so long. There's a lot of narratives about ship collisions, shipwrecks, and we've got all the details, technical details of what happened, you know, and ship plans and ship models. So is that something that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Our process is that we take any bit of dense information and we turn it into a visual representation of that, whether that is through sculpture or animation or illustration. And actually, oddly enough, ships and boats is a hyperfixation in this office.
Yeah, and if you've got all of the models and things, there's a lot of time saving that can be done with LiDAR scanning or even just photogrammetry to get the basic shape and then give it to a modeler to clean up. So the more stuff.
It will illustrate so much more than it will just, people will love it, just to see what happened. What happened.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well done.
Nice meeting you, Leon.
Are there any other questions? I think
Jeannie was asking what the reception of the museum been so far. So far online, we're seeing like those that have gone and then bothered to leave an online review have been liking it and enjoying it. Certainly the town of Graaff-Reinet has been incredibly positive and really has responded so warmly to it. So we've been very fortunate that the town liked it, because that was a concern. If the locals didn't like it, then we hadn't done our job properly.
But can I add 3 quick things?
Yes.
Actual experiences. So first thing that I just love to hear is I heard several people walk into, especially the Permian biodiversity room with the big sculptures. I think I heard at least 3 people say the exact sentence, "What is this doing here?" with disbelief of like, this shouldn't exist in a place like Graaff-Reinet. That was pretty cool. But the 2 that were especially cool were on the very first day of it being open to the public. The one was seeing a mom go up to her son who was in the waterhole room watching, and sort of bother him a few times, and eventually sort of take him by the hand and say, "You've been watching this for more than half an hour. We have to go now." Which was lovely. And then another group, family group, where one of the kids suddenly stood up in the waterhole animation, said, "Mom, it's the creature from the other room," and ran back to the Permian biodiversity. Spent like, I don't know, 30 seconds there or whatever, and then came running back and ran up to the screen and started like touching it, and then ran back to the biodiversity room and just kept doing this, like, see the video, see the sculpture, see the video, see the sculpture. And it's like, oh my God, that is perfect. That is what I wanted more than anything, for some little kid to be that excited, because that's how I used to feel about the Boonstra dioramas at Iziko. I adored them as a child and just blew me away. And to see just one kid have that experience there in our display was really, really magical.
Yeah.
Oh, it was really magical. There's something so beautifully authentic about the whole museum. Like you could feel like it was just like homegrown Graaff-Reinet. So I'm not surprised the town has taken to it. It's just a little bit of like a sliver of their soul. It's just so beautifully put together. But I think that's about it for our session. I don't see any more questions.
Yes, I wanted to say one more thing to this group is that one of the design principles that we used on this project was that we would be modular. So everything exists of this in the design cloud. It also, even the sculptures, we can recreate those sculptures. So for people who are looking for like a temporary display of this type of thing, please do chat to us, because all this work exists, and I know that we can connect you with Bruce and Karoo Origins, because that's also a mission on his, is just to get the information out there in the world. So everyone in this group, with the contacts that you have and the institutions that you work at, if you feel a temporary installation might be something that you are interested in, please touch base with us so that we can put together a package for you.
Oh, definitely. I've got many hopes and dreams. But thank you so much for coming. This was a really spectacular talk. I think I enjoyed everything. I have more questions than I have answers, but I'll definitely reach out to you and get them in time. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everybody who's joined us. I think we actually had almost 10 people come in and visit us. So thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Heidi, do you
Thanks so much for having us. It's awesome to meet you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much
Bye,
for joining
everyone.
us.
Bye.
Bye.